Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pathways to Knowledge. Each week, we bring you a special show, and this one is going to be very special as well. We're going to talk about miracles, and who better to discuss miracle with than Jesus himself? So, as you can see, Ellen is here with us, and we're going to have a very interesting show. So, Ellen, if you're ready to start, I'm ready to go as well.
All right. Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're going to discuss the miracles performed by Jesus during his lifetime. The New Testament lists 37 specific miracles performed during the 3 years of his ministry. We will channel Jesus tonight in this special show and discuss his special abilities and miracles, recorded and unrecorded, that he performed during his life. Lord, thank you for joining us tonight. How would you like to define a miracle?
A miracle is an act that takes place as a result of the energy of God. It is not something that would normally happen in the course of events, but it is truly an act of God. It is something that only God can do, and he can do it through his servants, through other humans, through whoever he determines is capable of doing miracles for him. But it is the result of an energy of God.
At what age did you realize that the special powers you had to perform miracles?
I actually understood at a fairly early age. I was probably 5 or 6 when I realized that I had to be careful about things I did. If I thought about something for an object, quite often I could tell that the object was affected by my thoughts. So I was very, very careful as I lived my life and in all the things that I did, because even though I had the ability, I didn't want to use it, because the whole point of my early life was living a life like a human would do. So really, I tried to avoid doing anything special with my energy until I began my ministries.
So you sort of had telekinetic powers?
I had all kinds of powers, but I kept them hidden.
So then at what age did you perform your first miracle, and could you describe it for us?
I performed a couple miracles that people are not aware of. During the time that I was married, my wife, Toba, had an accident, and I stepped in and healed her. We had probably only been married about 5 or 6 years at that time. But I would say that that was the first major miracle that I performed.
What was it like when you performed a miracle? Was it exhausting, or did it feel effortless?
It would depend on the scope of the miracle. Generally, it would be effortless. If I would think that what I wanted to do, it would take place, and it would not overcome me with emotion, or it would not overtire me because of the action I was taking. If I was doing a miracle for a crowd, for instance, and there were times that I would perform healings for small groups of people in my ministries. And in those moments, it would be more exhausting and require more energy. So it depends. But most of the time, it was just simply that I would think of it and it would happen.
So when you performed miracles, what did you most want people to understand about them?
I had to be very careful because I did not want the people to think that I was a true God. when I would perform a miracle, the people believed that that you were a God. So I told everyone that I was a son of God, and that would give me insulation from what people would believe about what I was doing. So by telling them I was the son of God, I felt that that would differentiate me from them thinking that I was a Roman God. Because as soon as the people thought that I was a Roman God, then the Romans would take serious note, and they would react very violently.
When you healed, did you only heal people of faith? And what was the relationship between human faith and divine intervention?
I would generally keep in mind this. During my ministries, the Christian church did not exist. So faith as you understand it did not exist. The Jewish people had faith that there was a one God. The Roman people and most of the people, all of the people in the area where I was performing my ministries was under the control of Romans. They believed, many of them believed in multiple gods. So I would be very careful in how I reacted to the different situations. So faith, as you think of it today, was totally different from the faith of my time. I tried to work with members of the Jewish faith because in the Jewish faith, they were waiting for the Messiah to return. So even though I was God incarnate, the members of the faith never accepted the fact that I truly was the Messiah that they were waiting for. So I tried to work with members of the Jewish faith, but there were times I wanted to set examples for the Romans because I wanted them to know as well that I had these special abilities, because I thought that it would help stop them from taking any violent actions before I was ready to end my life. So I guess if you consider the faith of the Jewish faith, that was the majority that I used. But faith really had very little to play in the decisions that I would be making. When I would see a person suffering or in need, I would use that opportunity to show my special abilities.
So I guess you kind of answered this one, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Could you heal anyone, or were there circumstances in which a person's lack of faith prevented healing?
Since there was no, let me rephrase this. A lack of faith, as you know it today, did not exist. So it had very little effect on who I would perform a miracle. It was generally an opportunity. But keep in mind that there were individuals sent back upon whom I would perform a miracle as part of my life plan. My life plan was much more complex than what it was for any normal human.
Why did your methods vary so significantly, from speaking a single word from afar, like the centurion's servants, to using spit and mud for a blind man's eye, to requiring physical action like washing in a pool?
Because I wanted the people to associate with the action. I did heal people that were blind, but I thought that it would be more dramatic and that people would better remember me healing a person by using mud that I made with my own saliva and use that as a marking that people would remember. I did things in different ways to assure that the miracles that I performed would be remembered. Many of the miracles where I just simply healed people were forgotten. But when I was more dramatic in what I did, the people remembered better. And that was really what I wanted.
Both you and Mary Magdalene have told of performing a miracle to heal her. Why isn't it recorded in the New Testament?
It was a very undramatic healing. It is recorded in certain Gospels that are not part of the Bible. The role of Mary was never truly appreciated. In the beginning, she was a disciple, as any of my other disciples. When I healed her, she became as close to me as any of the other disciples. So generally, I did things for the disciples, but I didn't want anyone to think that I was showing special priorities to who I heal. So since Mary was so close to me and was helping me in so many ways with my ministries, I did not want the public to think that I was only healing those that were close. I wanted the healings to be much more random so that the people believed, and it was what I was doing, that it was for everyone and not just for those closest to me. So Mary's role in the Gospels changed through the years. For years, she was revered. And then the Pope decided, by getting the Marys mixed up, that she was a prostitute. And from that time forward, everyone's attitude towards her changed. So it depends on which Gospels you look at, when they were written, or when they were redefined, into how you see Mary's role. I definitely healed her, and she was sent back to serve me. So I guess you could say that it was prearranged, but most of the healings were not.
Did you perform miracles out of compassion or to show others your divine power?
Both. But it wasn't to show my divine power. I would say that it was the energy of my Father in heaven, that I was his son, and through him, I was healing others. It would be misinterpreted, and people would just simply assume that it was my energies. But I was always very careful to separate myself and never consider myself a god in front of the people. As I've said many times, the Romans would have reacted violently to that before I had completed my ministries.
So did you really walk on water?
No, I tried, but I got wet. Walking on water, I think, was really stretching it, and there was no reason why I would perform something like that. Had I done that, the people would have thought truly that I was a god. And as I keep saying, this is not the concept that I wanted to give them.
How did you choose which requests to answer and which to leave untouched?
Poverty and suffering was everywhere during my ministries. I would help people that I thought needed help. While there are, 37 required in the Bible, are written in the Bible, I probably did hundreds, because many of the people that I healed, I would be alone with them and no one observed it. They would speak of it, but most of them could not write. Their families might know about it, but through time, the memories would die and would never be recorded. So I performed many, many miracles. Some of them were in front of large groups, and that was intentionally so, because I wanted some of the major miracles to be remembered and to be recorded. And the more people that I would do it in front of, the better the odds that someone would remember and record it.
The New Testament records 3 instances where you brought individuals back to life. How did you determine when and to whom you would bring back to life?
I had many opportunities to bring people back to life, but I had to be careful because I knew that I was going to resurrect from the grave, and I did not want to complicate things. But I wanted people to realize that it was possible for a body to rise from the grave. So I selected 3 individuals where I thought the story would be recorded. And I did, shall we say, resurrect 3 people from death. But I wanted to be very careful. Those people that were resurrected simply continued with their lives. I was tortured. My body was totally beaten. There was no way that I could have ever returned from the grave with my body in the condition that it was, as I did for the other 3. When I resurrected, I was in spirit form, and then I changed to physical form. So I wanted people to understand the concept that individuals could arise from the grave through the power of God, but I did not want it to be associated with what happened to my body and soul when it resurrected.
Please tell us about turning water into wine at Cana, and what was the purpose of this miracle?
It was not a large group of people. It was a marriage ceremony, and the people ran out of wine. So I thought that it would be a good act to make sure that they had more wine to complete their ceremony and celebration of marriage. It was not done in front of a very large group of people, but it was simply something that entered my mind that it would be a good thing to do for the group. It was recorded and has become one of my more famous miracles. But at the time, It was something that I simply wanted to do as a favor for the people. And it was during my ministries, and I was trying to do many different things so that people could truly understand what God was capable of doing.
It's stated in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that you fed 5,000 people. Would you please tell us about that event?
That is an exaggeration. There were not 5,000 people. Whenever I spoke, the groups would be small. They would be celebrations. But for 5,000 people to associate in that time for a single individual, it would have been literally impossible. When I would speak to people, maybe 400 or 500 people could hear my words. There were no microphones. I would speak as loudly as I could without yelling, but there were always limitations. Families would have children with them. You would have babies crying. So it was very hard to communicate. I did not have the ability to speak into a microphone. So I did help feed the people, but it was to a group of maybe 300-400 people. I wanted to perform miracles to groups so that there would be more people that could remember such a miracle. Everyone in that group understood there was not enough food, and that I said, God will care for you and provide what you need. And suddenly there was enough food. So it was all to show the power of God.
You performed several healings on the Sabbath. Was this time to upset the high Jewish priests?
I always knew there should be a day of rest. The people worked very hard, and they needed to have a day of peace and comfort where they could regroup physically. To the Jewish faith, it was a day of complete rest. I knew there was going to be a time that I would be, shall we say, relying upon the Jewish priests to bring an end to my life. I wanted to make sure that they had sufficient cause. So it was intentional, but it was also a day where it was easy to associate with groups of people because they were not at work. During the week, as you would refer to it now, they were in the fields, they were growing crops, they were doing all of the things, and it was very difficult to bring people together. So the Sabbath provided a time where they were not working. So I used that opportunity to work with families who were intact or with groups. But yes, I also knew that I would need some cause to make sure that the action was taken when I needed it to be taken.
You performed multiple deliverances from evil or unclean spirits that today would be described as exorcism. Were these healings done to define evil spirits or compassion for the individual?
both. I wanted people to understand that evil truly existed, that evil energies will succumb to the power of God. So I took people that were under the influence of evil energies, and I drove those evil energies from their bodies. And that proved to everyone that the power of God will succeed over the power of evil. It can succeed at any level. For instance, you don't need an exorcism to make a decision to follow my teachings instead of following evil. But yes, I wanted individuals to truly understand that evil existed, but that the power of God could always overcome evil.
Tell us about raising Lazarus from the dead at Bethany.
Lazarus had a large family. He had succumbed to an illness, and he had just recently passed. I performed a miracle and had his soul return to his body. The event had been arranged in my life plan. So the angels knew to keep the soul close to the body and to not allow it to ascend into a heaven as would take place with a normal passing. So Lazarus had lived a good life, and I knew that he would take advantage of the time that I gave him. He had a large family who would remember and, in all probability, record the event or have it recorded. So Lazarus, shall we say, filled all the boxes I needed. So he was one of the individuals that I chose.
So when you raised Lazarus, where had his spirit been during the time his body was dead? And what happened when he returned?
I had the angels keep the spirit close to the body. I did not want it to ascend into heaven because it would have, shall we say, been very complicated for the spirit of Lazarus. The spirit of Lazarus did not know in advance what was taking place. So I had the angels there, and they did not have him ascend into heaven as would have ordinarily taken place. His soul did not go to hell. There is no hell. So I just simply had this soul remain. When you pass into the dimension, there is no time. So it's not like the soul was said, you must wait for 6 hours. The angels were there in this timeless dimension. And when I brought the energy of God forward, that energy brought the soul back into the body, and I breathed life into the body of Lazarus. And in addition, I did the miracle of healing any of what happens to a body when it begins to decompose upon death. So I arranged through different aspects of the miracle that Lazarus could rise and perform a normal life.
So there was no place in particular that he went to. It was kind of like when you hear people say they died and they were watching people work on them in the hospital as they coded. They could see the doctors. He was kind of around, but he wasn't around.
His soul was observing everything in a manner similar to what you are describing. He just simply was not taken to the depth of heaven.
How many miracles did you perform that were not recorded?
Probably hundreds. But the miracles of God are unlimited. Everything that you see around you is a creation of God and can be considered a miracle of God. I performed, shall we say, secondary miracles. The true miracles to any healing was when the baby was conceived from 2 cells and was born as billions of cells. That is one of the greatest miracles of God. So simply healing those cells, I would consider that a secondary type of miracle.
But could you tell us about some of the unrecorded miracles?
Most of them were relatively simple. In those days, there were no hospitals. If you broke your leg, there would be a crude attempt to set it, but individuals could become invalids, have problems walking. Leprosy was a very dangerous illness during my time. I would cleanse people of leprosy so that they could continue with normal lives. Most of what I did were relatively simple healings to you as modern people and understanding modern medicine. But in those days, the simplest of disease could be fatal. A high fever from what you refer to as a cold, pneumonia. These were all things that were fatal in my time. So there was plenty of opportunity to heal people or to heal people from the effects of incidents that had happened to them. So it was very simple to find situations where I could do miracles. Most of the ones that are not recorded were very simple healings. I only brought 3 individuals back from death, and those are well recorded.
Your daughter Sarah died at an early age. Why did you not perform a miracle to save her?
The purpose of my life until the time of my ministries was to understand the emotions of humans. The most difficult emotion for a human is grief. And I had to experience that emotion during my human life. I could have healed her, but I allowed her to pass so that I could truly understand the depth of grief that all humans go through. It was an incredibly difficult time for me. And believe me when I say, I often considered performing a miracle and saving her life. But it would have defeated the most important thing, which was me to understand truly how grief affects humans.
What type of illness did she have?
She had what you would refer to as, I think, asthma. She had trouble breathing, and it just continued to get worse. And she suffered, and she passed from not being able to breathe.
Did you ever perform any miracles on your family members?
Yes, when my wife had an accident, I healed her. And that was, as I said, my first miracle.
Your greatest miracle was when you resurrected from the tomb. What can you tell us about this greatest miracle?
The miracle of resurrection that I performed required incredible energy. It required energies greater than you are capable of creating, and in all probability will not be able to create any time in the future. During the resurrection, I actually levitated my body vertically and then had this energy take place, which is basically indescribable for you. I ascended into heaven, but I was in a different form than what a human would be in, because I had access to forming my physical body. When a soul passes, it becomes an energy form. But I used that great energy to ascend into the dimension where I had the capabilities to have my physical and my soul energies reform. That is as simple a way as I can describe the resurrection for you. It is not something that is ever going to be duplicated. It is not something that I intend to do again. But it was meant to show the ultimate abilities that God has. The resurrection of my body and my appearing after my true time of passing is indeed the greatest miracle that I ever performed.
How many unrecorded times did you appear after your resurrection?
In total, I probably appeared maybe 20 times. I appeared to my mother. I appeared to my wife. I appeared to Mary Magdalene. I had special appearances, such as I had to appear to Paul, because he was going to play a very important role in the future. I appeared to Thomas because he had to be able to verify the ultimate proof that I was truly in physical form. I appeared to Peter several times and had discussions with him on how I wanted him to carry forth. I essentially appeared to all of the disciples. I appeared them in groups, and I would come to them perhaps in their dreams, perhaps in my physical form, but I made sure that everyone that was close to me understood what I wanted of them in the future.
Does the energy required for a miracle only emanate from God? For example, when an angel performs a miracle, does the angel only direct God's energy, or does it direct its own energy?
The energy only comes from God. The angels have the ability to direct healing energies. I can give humans the ability to direct healing energies through special prayers, but it is always the directed energy of God.
Did you leave your disciples with the ability to heal or create miracles?
To a lesser degree, most of them had the ability to heal, because healing is probably the most spectacular miracle that any human can perform, because that allows the individual that was healed to carry on with his life.
Which of your miracles have been most understood by humanity?
I would say that it was the 3 miracles where I brought people back from death. I wanted them to understand that only God can do these miracles and has the power to do it. But I think in each instance, the powers were attributed more to me as an individual. And in my life, I always wanted people to associate what I was doing with the powers of God.
In modern times, are miracles ever performed for individuals who do not have faith or belief in God?
There are times, perhaps we have sent an individual back with an important life plan. They've been distracted from that life plan. So we may be able, by showing them a miracle, that God truly exists, and bring them back to that favorable life plan. So there are times when we do miracles for non-believers, but we make sure that they understand. Just the same as there are times we do near-death experiences for non-believers so that they can come back and change their lives and tell others of these miracles.
If you could explain only one of your miracles to people living today, which would you choose, and what would you want us to understand about it?
If I could discuss only one of my miracles, it would undoubtedly be my resurrection, because it is the ultimate proof of the powers of God. It shows that God's powers literally have no limits. And my resurrection is a personification that anything is possible with God. So it would be the true implications of my resurrection that I would want to have everyone understand.
Where did your soul go, or where did your energy go when you died, between when you died and when you resurrected?
When I died, my soul left my body like any other soul. But as with Lazarus, I stayed close by because I knew that I had to go back and re-enter my body in order to do this great miracle, the resurrection. So it's not like you would say that my soul descended into hell. All souls go to heaven, and my soul was no different in that respect. The difference was that through the powers of God, I could return to my body and perform the resurrection.
Have you ever reincarnated again?
No,
Would you ever consider it?
not in the form of Jesus.
But in another human form?
Let's just say that is above your pay grade.
Just questioning. I mean, I know you can do anything, but anyhow, do you have a final message for us?
Yes. I would like to thank all of you that have listened to all of the words that I have spoken tonight. The most important message that you can get from my messages are that anything is possible with God. God can heal. When I walked the earth, I resurrected people back to life. I did many things. I created wine. I created food. I did all of the things that I could do to help others. What I ask each of you to do is to do your best to help others. There are some of you that I've given the abilities to heal through prayer, but whatever takes place, it is through the power and energy of God. All things are possible in God's world. All you have to do is have your foundation of faith, show your love to others, and do the best that you can do. You will find that when you do these things and truly understand my powers, that you will live the happiest life that you can live. I came back and learned all of the lessons that I needed to learn on how human emotions work. I suffered pain. I suffered grief. I suffered all of the things that humans suffer. So I totally understand and know what humans require. And what they require is an unshakable faith in God. When you do this, all things are possible. So thank you so much for allowing me to discuss my miracles. I hope that it has deepened your faith and will help strengthen the foundation upon which you build your life. Goodbye. Wow. Very interesting.
Mhm.
The whole life of Jesus is just unbelievable. I wrote about his life before his ministries in my book, Jesus, the Missing Years. And it speaks a lot about how he suffered, how he lived his normal life. I'm hoping I have time to write a book about his ministries, but that's totally up to him. So, Elena, thank you so much.
Thank
Another
you.
great show. We'll return next week and we'll see what happens. So, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Hopefully. There you go. I click these things and it takes God's miracles to make them work for me. So, I thank you very much. I am so happy that you take time to listen to our shows. Wednesdays, I bring you a weekly message from Jesus. So I do channel him quite a bit. So thank you. Thank you for all of you being who you are. Please tell others about her, and we'll be back again next week.